Everyone, and welcome to the podcast. We have a very special guest joining us, somebody that I've been watching through fellow friend Nick Benyamin for quite a while, Mr. Louis Herms, who is a tough get because of all the outreach he's doing. But it's a great honor and a treat to have him on. And we're going to be exploring some of the things he's working on here specifically for California and his vision that God has put for him as to how he can better a state that is in dire need of change. And he's got some pretty great solutions as to how he's going to tackle that. So we'll be talking about that with him and all things global, geopolitical, financial, and wherever the conversation should go. If you're new to the podcast, please do like, subscribe, and share. It helps the channel grow and others to gain the knowledge you're currently being afforded. As we always do with first-time guests, he has generously given us his bio, so I will read it thusly. So as you know, he's a regular monthly contributor on our friend Nick Benyamin's podcast, first and foremost. He's about being a truth fighter for we the people, has a long and clear track record of doing that. He is a driving force behind transformative initiatives such as Screwing Big Government, Freedom in Action, Truth Tour, Remembering Your Constitutional Oath, and Unification. He's all about solutions, not problems. I'm very much an advocate of that. And he certainly stands for that. There are some key issues behind which he's working towards, primarily homelessness, housing costs, infrastructure, and transportation. Certainly, having lived here in California for the better part of 17 years, I know the flawed scam of the railway system that never came to fruition. Lewis is well familiar. And his family and he have sacrificed immensely on a personal financial level to help the state and the planet from tyrannical control. And we, the people, hold that power and unification. And his sole goal is to unite California like never before. And I'm honored and pleased to have with us today, Mr. Louis Herms. Thank you for joining the podcast. How are you doing today, good sir?
Great. It's so good to be here, John. Appreciate you too.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'm a little nervous because I'm excited. I didn't know if I was actually going to ever be able to interview you. So this is a real treat. So
I'm honored. I really am.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So, Louis, give the audience who's not familiar with you a little bit about your background, how long you've been in California, and what was the impetus for you to try to run for governor?
Yeah, well, I'm native. I'm born and raised in California 60 years ago. My background is a lot of sales, marketing, training, and then it morphed into troubleshooting, where I would go into very significant, large businesses. And whatever was not working, I had to bring them from the bottom to the top. And that was generally through personnel changes, motivation, marketing styles, sales, and a lot of systemization of issues that we were having. So that was interesting because I guess it came from, I've always been one that looks at a problem as a challenge, because I know sometimes a problem doesn't have a solution, but a challenge always has a solution. And just the reframing of that word alone has really empowered me to do some powerful things. And I'm excited about it. I say, okay, it's a challenge. Let's get to the solution. And over the years, John, it's really weird because I was really good at taking that square peg and slamming it in a round hole, right? And people say, "Oh, you're so successful." Yeah, but I guess I was successful almost through brute force and just keep pounding away at it. And I finally learned one day that, sometimes solutions are easier. Maybe I should start asking God instead of trying to do everything on my own. So I started paying attention to the word, and the word inside my head. It went, okay, what should I do? Boom. And I started to find out that the solutions were a lot more simple, and I was overcomplicating things. So over the years, I developed some techniques to look at things from a different angle. And I'm happy to say that they seem to be working out pretty well. So I'm bringing that to the campaign. But what drew me into the campaign was the fact that I knew, based on the political climate, there's no way I would be supporting a Democrat in California, right? It's a controlled operation for sure. I was concerned about the Republicans, and I already knew that the California GOP was most likely corrupt as well. And they like losing. They do a good job at losing. So I said, what on earth can I possibly do? I said, well, let me see what Republican candidates or independent candidates I can support. So I started reading everything. And there's a couple nice We the People guys there, but they weren't really focusing on what I thought was mega important, and that was ending child trafficking. They weren't focusing on dismembering the political establishment as it is. They weren't focusing on trying to get judges removed that are obstructionists or complicit in bad behavior. And the list goes on and on and on. And I certainly didn't see a lot of people trying to adjust our food products and our health products, and nobody seemed to be going after big pharma. So, as you know, I've done a lot of documentaries and travel the world and done tours and trying to wake people up and give solutions doing that. So I said, God, what are we doing here? And he came back, you're running for governor. And I argued a little bit, be honest with you. I said, nah, that's not going to happen. I'm not doing it. Yep, that's what you're doing. So here I am today, and we're getting a lot of traction. I mean, as of November 8th, we were ranked, 15 or lower, and now we're ranked in the top three, it appears. So that's pretty darn good traction. And with the upcoming debate, I think we're going to do really, really well.
Well, kudos to you because that is a tremendous challenge you're taking on. But as you said, with God, all things are possible. And certainly, I think what I heard you say initially was, excuse me, is the mindset, the attitudinal change of the mindset had to start from within. That's a lot of what we focus on our show. Other than the wealth transfer, it all begins in the mind, right? And you started to reframe it and started to get results accordingly. So a lot of ways to slice the pie, Lewis, with this discussion, but let's take it from a global view footprint and bring it down to the macro or micro world for California. So we see what just happened recently last week with Venezuela. We all knew that was coming, I think. It has multiple implications for, oil, ultimately, lower gas prices, and at some point, free energy and so on and so forth in the new world we're headed. As you well know, I live in California. You live in California. This place, unfortunately, is notorious for being overpriced and corrupt at the most moribund levels, particularly at the pump. What is your approach or strategy to help, take what President Trump is doing from a top level and get it down to a level that Californians that are still here can benefit?
Yeah. Ultimately, all our overpricing in California is based on a few things. Overregulation would be probably your number one cause. Fake environmental regulations, and they are absolutely fake. I mean, we understand exactly. I was in the Palisades yesterday, and even 90% of the liberals were saying climate change did not burn down the Palisades. So people are starting to understand the manipulation there. Um, and overtaxation is astronomical in this. So that's why we're approaching $8 to $10 per gallon when other states are seeing three. That's why we don't know what the future holds for us. But we have to understand the construct. So I will go down to the micro. When traditionally in a war, and I think we all should realize that's what we're in right now. We are in a war. And it may not seem like that, but it is absolutely, it's that minimum of 5G psychological war, but I think it's a lot, it's also kinetic at areas proven by what happened in Venezuela and what happens with the riots on the streets here, so on and so forth, which has happened with the ICE agent shooting somebody. We are in a war. That's the kinetic part. So when the enemy traditionally loses a war, what they do is they do what's called scorched earth progress. And they burn down everything they possibly can and destroy everything. So what they call their enemy, the opponent, doesn't have any infrastructure to work with. That's exactly what Gavin Newsom and his cronies are doing in California right now. They know they've lost the war. It's very clear to them. There's not an appetite for their BS anymore. I saw it in the Palisades yesterday. You have 90% liberals screaming at Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass. They know it's over for them. So what they're doing is they're doing everything they can to destroy California right now. Now, the benefit for them is what I believe they're probably hoping is they can drive enough conservatives out of the state so when we actually have a real free and fair election, that they might actually win legitimately. I believe that could be their goal. At worst, the rats are scurrying and they're trying to destroy everything. So what we have to do is we have to pull back immediately on all that regulation. But what's going to affect everything at the highest level, and not just gas prices, it's going to affect so many other things, is we're going to go and we're going to super doge the budget. I've been saying for several years that California is filled with waste, fraud, and abuse, right? In fact, my friend just said add redundancy to that, and I would agree with them. And they are. They are filled with all of that. But I was also the first to say we're probably at least 70%, if not 80%, based on my investigations. And I was called crazy about a year ago. And now people are coming back to me and says, Lewis, it looks like you're probably right on with your numbers. So John, let's take that. If we can eliminate 70%, that means our operation is we have 100% operational money on 30% of a budget. So what do? We bring back everything as much as we possibly can. You eliminate property taxes, you eliminate income taxes, you eliminate all those ridiculous regulations, and then the market starts to take care of itself. I don't have to target. I mean, thank you for opening up more gas or so on and so forth. And yes, we can start drilling more offshore and deregulate and drill more here. But all of that comes with the deregulation and doging the budget. So it's a beautiful thing, and it won't just affect gas. To be honest with you, it's going to affect everything,
Mm.
everything very positively. In fact, it's going to drive businesses back into California instead of from California.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you, Liz, because yeah, as you know, this state is notoriously anti-business, and it shows with many companies. From Chevron to In-N-Out Burger and a whole host of companies just migrating wholesale to other states, and rightfully so. Unfortunately, I mean, another thing I'd love to see you tackle is the what is it? I can't think off the top of my head in Sacramento when you're trying to open up like an incorporation for a business. All the corruption that's there that is so antithetical to any sort of enterprise. You see the malls, just dying here, like I see in the South Bay, but then you go to other parts of the country. I was just in Florida with family, and you see it thriving over there. So you see the disparateness between the red states and the blue states. Although, to your point, as I've traveled around the state, yes, the nation sees this place as liberal, and unfortunately, from a corruption standpoint, they're not wrong. But I think a lot of the people in general are a lot more conservative than maybe people realize or given credit. So, one of the things I was curious to ask you about, Lewis, is, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, I'm just curious, have you had any outreach with President Trump? And if so, do you think that he might be potentially willing to give you his endorsement? And what would that do to help you galvanize these wholesale changes?
Oh, it's a great question. I actually have a letter that likely will be signed by other people in California, including some of my gubernatorial opponents, of putting together an emergency order for election reform in California immediately. I've been told that Trump is aware of me. I've never talked to him personally. I've been within, a few feet of him several times at events that I was invited to, and some were VIP events with him and some other people. So I don't know. I do deal with people on his team often, and they say he's fully aware of what I'm doing. I've never reached out for an endorsement, nor will I. And the reason why is because I believe my work will guide God to pull anybody together that needs to be endorsing me. Um, and Trump knows I'm very open, honest, and sometimes even hard on him and his team. Like right now, I'm not a fan of Pam Bondi. I think Pam Bondi needs to do her job right now, this second. There's a lot of stuff to do, and but I don't really. I would love an endorsement, but I don't need an endorsement, right? Because this is about we, the people of California, taking our state back. And if you people watch and look at my policy issues, they're going to know exactly where I stand on everything. And for example, I got a lot of heat for my stance on the Venezuela thing because they know that I lean libertarian. They're like, how dare could you support us going in there and kidnapping the Maduro? And I said, wait. Let's just break this down. Let's not get emotional. Not every scenario is the same, right? This scenario does not appear to be a typical regime change scenario that have been done under the Bush administration and the Clinton administration and Obama's and so on and so forth. That's not what's going on here, in my opinion, because I like to look at facts. This guy's been indicted for several years as a narco terrorist. So we went in there and arrested him, not kidnapped him. Number one. We also had no loss of life on our side whatsoever, which is extraordinary. The other thing that we promised that we would do is that we will prop up their government for a while and then turn it over for the people to vote. And then we were only were want to extract the money lost in what we're doing there, and that's going to be through businesses and oil. It's a very pragmatic plan to me, and it makes a lot of sense exactly the way this is being handled. So I get a lot of hate because people know I'm an anti-war person, but that to me that's not war. That's not what we're looking at. We're taking out somebody that, and it's funny. I said to that they've sent fentanyl to kill us, and they're they don't deal in fentanyl. They deal in cocaine. No, no, they've still sent 5 tons of fentanyl, enough to kill every single American over
Yeah.
here. They've already sent it over here on boats. We've caught it. Not to mention the cocaine. But what they're missing is a couple things. Venezuela is a huge child trafficking hub. And I can tell you, I've talked personally that
Sure.
people are dealing with them and they're pushing children through Venezuela into Colombia. And from Colombia, they're finding a way to get them in the United States and other places around the world. That is a crime against humanity alone.
Yep.
Lest we forget that they were in charge of Dominion machines and warehousing them, and that is a direct affront and act of war against us, trying to manipulate our elections. It's
Hmm.
funny how soon we forget these things. That is imperative. So I really appreciate what he's done in Venezuela, and I hope this coincides with my request to get an immediate election reform in the state of California, because if we're not reformed, we really don't have a chance in regards.
Agreed. Yeah, it's good insight, Lewis. Thank you for that. And extenuating it to Iran as well, because he kind of killed two birds with one stone. Because with them, I don't know if you're aware, but there were got reports that the airports in Greece were shut down recently for a lot of military bases there, ultimately to try to deal with Cyprus to get to Iran and shut that supply off, and all the nefarious corruption that's existed there as well for many many decades. So taking that to the next level, Lewis, let's talk about the gigantic elephant in the room that I'm wondering, and I'm sure some of our audience might be as well, because the state, from a political level, has been, as you said earlier, so moribund and notoriously corrupt. How do you infiltrate those areas at the highest levels without getting corrupt yourself? Because it takes a lot of money and a lot of work to get to that position. How do you do it in a way that circumvents all the traditional exploits?
Are you saying to get into the position or after I'm in the position?
To get into the position, yeah.
Okay, no, it's a great question. So the I've already done the math, and it seems like based on our grassroots campaign and some help with some other people's maybe folding their campaigns into ours for grassroots reasons, that we likely can win the second spot in the primary. That's all we need to do, by the way, to get into the general, with a tenth of the money that the top two guys have. And that's pretty significant because we're a lot more efficient already the way we spend our money. We honor the money that we get to move forward. And I've already told people that come try to corrupt me, it's going to be embarrassing for you. For example, if somebody comes and they try to offer me something, I literally will go post them on Facebook and X. Here's this guy, here's what he was offering. We're not going to have it. So the good news is I get threats. I've been poisoned, but I don't get too many offers. I think they're very clear to do this. So, there was an example out there a long time ago. The FBI came to my house to intimidate my wife and I, and they're in my backyard, and I ended up interrogating them because what they were doing was wrong, and it was based on J6. They used the proxy argument of the bomber as why they wanted to talk to us, and it was complete BS. I called them out on it. I proved it in my backyard. They were drinking iced tea and lemonade with me, and we had a long conversation. And they said, "So what now?" And I said, "Well, what now is before your heels hit the pavement on the street, I will be posting this on Facebook that you're at my house." I said, well, why would you do that? I go, people need to know what's going on. And I said, the good news for you, though, is I will post a flyer about the bomber so they can look for that person also. So I have precedence on this is the way I behave. I call out corruption no matter where it comes from. So I really don't think, unless they're just absolutely stupid, that people are going to really come trying to buy me off. I would be shocked. I'd probably give them one warning shot and say, "You sure you want to do this?" And the second one is boom. So I believe they'll go, because by the way, there's stages, and I've talked to several candidates. The first stage is, hey, help us out with this. We'll make it worth your while. No, don't want to do that. Second stage is, okay, we have a bank account set up for you. You're going to get, somebody told me $4 million. All you have to do is do this, and you'll be able to get that money out of the escrow. And they're like, no, I won't do this. The third call to this one guy that I'm thinking of, representative, 10 minutes later is, we're going to destroy you. And here's how we're going to do it. And the fourth call is, I saw your daughter leaving school at 1234 Maple Street. She's so cute. That's the game that they play. So I believe they'll probably skip the buy off things and they'll go right to that. But I can't be intimidated either. So it's going to be an interesting game. So that being said, I don't need the money in order to do that. We're going to get grassroots efforts, and I believe we'll have enough money. If we get 10%, like I say, we'll be able to do really good. Now, when I get into the office, that's where it really gets heated.
Mm-hmm.
And cutting the budget the way we're going to cut the budget immediately will give us some form of a surplus. And this is where law enforcement's going to step in. I'm already meeting with law enforcement in the background, by the way. This is where law enforcement's going to step in, because we already have task forces set up that on day one will be completely activated to take care of things. And that's going to be going after corrupt judges. That's going to be going after political influence, people buying off. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. We're already working on a website called Exposure that's just going to be tallied over to be exposure.ca.gov to help shine a light on these people. And I have a feeling they're going to make it a little bit easier. I have a feeling that a lot of people will be retiring upon me getting elected.
From your lips to God's ears, Lewis. I'll certainly be an advocate for that. And then you alluded. Thank you, by the way. You alluded to this earlier in the beginning of our podcast. So let's take the next step, if you don't mind. So we talked about companies that have left California who are native here, et cetera, to get a better life, other places, cheaper operating costs, et cetera. Talk to native Californians who have gone to other states because they're so pissed off and dissatisfied with the corruption here. How do you win them back? And how long do you think it'll take once you are governor to do that?
I believe day one of being elected, people are going to start to flood back in, because we've had a lot of conversations. I mean, so many, hundreds of conversations with people, and many outside of the state already. In fact, you can go all through my social media. As soon as you're elected to us, we're moving back to California, over and over and over. And I'm not saying it's because of me, John. I'm saying it's because of the policies that we've set up are so inviting for California getting back to the gold state that it should be. We're the fourth largest economy in the world, and you would never know on it by the way we behave and the way we manage things. I promise that I'm not going to be governor of California. I'm going to be guardian of California. I promise that I always will understand I work for we the people. So much so that what we're going to do is we're going to set up all the budgets, line item expenses on the website live for anybody to look at it. There may be about 8 to 9% that has to be hidden for security reasons, but all the other stuff will be there live, line item. So you or anybody else can go on as a Californian, and you can say, and I use this example, you bought a desk for $460. Well, we found that exact desk on IKEA for 120. Lewis, you said this wasn't going to happen. I'll reply, or somebody on my team will reply, we apologize, we're on it, thank you very much. So now we the people are auditing the government, is the way it should be, instead of the government constantly auditing we the people.
Right.
That level of accountability alone will drive people back in droves, because now we've built a trust factor that they haven't had before.
Good point. Good point. Now, sticking with that, and again, because there's a lot of verticals we could dissect, obviously, I'm just trying to get as much with this and out of you for the time we have, just to address as much as we can. Hollywood has been cleaned out and been dealt with, and that industry. I'm in the entertainment world, music too, so that's what initially drew me here years ago. A lot of that work has left. And you talked about Venezuela and the pedophilia and the trafficking. You, as well as I know, because you live in that area, that this state is notorious, particularly in the entertainment industry, whether it's film, sports, or music, does not matter. They're all ensconced, and people tend to have a bit of idol worship in those worlds, as you know, with their favorite actors, their favorite athletes, their favorite musicians. All the while, under that cover, there's that I've seen it in the background of, drugs and sex and trafficking and all that horrible stuff. How do you clean all that up in California and rid it the way that President Trump is doing on his side to a way that is going to bring back a wholesome element to something that was once pure?
Well, we're going to make sure, number one, that we only support constitutional sheriffs, and and letting them know. I'm going to hold a symposium soon. We'll see when it's going to be with some sheriffs, and letting them know that we will absolutely support you and do your job. And if you're not doing your job, we're going to hold you accountable, because the sheriffs have a lot more power than people realize. I think sometimes even a lot more power than they realize. So first, accountability with the sheriffs, and therefore accountability with our civil servants, that they are after this stuff. Now, that's if it's illegal, if they're breaking illegal. Now, if it's just breaking a moral barrier and not a legal barrier, well, that's up to we, the people, and obviously the Guardian in California and our whole team to lead by example. You know, I've screwed up many times in my life. Probably done some things that were immoral, but I can own it. And I can move on, and I can make sure I'm always every day making myself a better person and a better person, right? But if you touch a child, I'm sorry, you're done with me. There's no coming back from that, in my opinion.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, Matthew says better to have a millstone hung around your neck and thrown into the sea than to ever hurt one of my little ones. So
Exactly right.
God has appointed you for this position, and I know you're obviously well aware of that. Franchise tax board was what I was alluding to earlier. I had a business once here. It was horrible to deal with, to start to end. So if you can clean that up, you're going to go a long way to getting some traction in this state.
Yeah, in fact, I've said often, I say when people are complaining about the IRS, I said, you haven't dealt with the franchise tax board.
They're worse.
Yeah, it's an
Yeah.
absolute brown shirt Gestapo
Oh,
in my opinion. Now,
I agree.
I've had phone calls with them as of late, just to, testing them out, so on and so forth. And I will say their customer service is getting a lot better. So
Didn't get any worse.
they seem to be nicer while they're taking you to the cleaners, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very weird, actually. But
It is.
the reality is, I don't see a place under a reformed government where state taxes, income taxes, or property taxes even exist.
Yeah. Well, going back to constitutional republic, as you alluded to, eliminates all that anyway. That's what President Trump is doing, and he's
Right.
allowing the states to self police. So you would be tapping into that wholesale. You have a subject here that obviously I'm familiar with. Being in the Los Angeles area, I've seen in the South Bay, and I think any native Californian's seen it, no matter north or south. Homelessness. How
Mm.
are you planning to tackle that and empower those people instead of the disenfranchising that they're currently under?
Yeah, so I'm going to take a different approach. And I
Okay.
know a lot of conservatives, they go, oh, a lot of business people go, oh my God, I can't believe you're saying that. So, and that is, first, we have to understand that homeless are human. These are real people. Many of them have severe challenges. Yes, some may be offensive to you, but we cannot fix homelessness if we dehumanize the homeless, right? So the first thing is we have to have compassion for that. Now, what we have to do is we have to look at this with an open and honest eye. And I believe we have to segment homelessness, that you can't all lump them into the same. So let's start with seniors and vets. Immediately, they should have some place to live. We need to figure that out. Absolutely 100%. I believe there is ways that we can build an actual homeless facility where people can live safely with security and thrive, and have a path to get out of there for 1/20th of what's spent already. Well, let's say what's stolen already
Hmm.
through the government of California. And we have a path to that, and I call that victory, because that would be victory. But we have to segment them. So senior vets off the street immediately. We got to take care of you. Your seniors, your wise ones, you've lived the years. There's no way that you should be there. Vets, you've fought for our country, or you were at minimum willing to die for our country. We got you. We're going to figure this out with you. Then there's another segment, of course. Are you there just because you don't have enough money to thrive? right? But you want to work and you want to be part of the society. If the answer is yes to that, we'll put you in this box and let's help you with this. Let's get you trained. Let's get you some temporary housing. Because the goal is you want to get anybody that can be rehabilitated into our society, you want to do that. You don't want to keep holding them accountable. So that kind of leaves about two other segments. One would be drugs. There's a lot of people that have substance abuse, drugs, and alcohol problems on there, right? They should be extracted from the streets and put in some form of a rehab facility immediately. And if it's against their will, it may just have to be because you cannot live on the streets. So I will be forceful in that. And I know that's offensive to some people, but ultimately, and it is, you're right. So if you do want to do drugs and alcohol, you can do that on your own because I believe in your constitutional right to do that, to harm yourself if you feel that's what you want to do. But the reality is you cannot live on a public property in order to live that lifestyle. That's unallowable. So we'll have to work on that. And lastly, and this may be the most important one, and this is the one that people are afraid to tackle. Ronald Reagan, which I appreciate a lot of the things he did, but what I think where he failed is eliminating mental institutions. And you evaluate these people, and the ones that you believe are mentally unfit, where they'll be harm to themselves or harm to others, need to be put into a compassionate mental institution, not one that's going to put you on Thorazine and make you sleepy all day long and walking around like a zombie, right? And deal with them compassionately. If they can be rehabilitated mentally, that's great. If they cannot, they still should not be on the streets for lack of having the mental aptitude to live anywhere else. And all those solutions I'm talking about can be done within a tenth to possibly a
Mhm.
20th of what's already being stolen in the United States. I mean, in
Yeah.
California, I apologize.
No, no, I know what you meant. No, thank you. And that goes back to what you're talking about, tackling big pharma at the same time. So it's like killing two birds with one stone.
Mhm.
Thank you, Liz. Next thing I want to ask you about is California is such a big state from a population and a land density size. You could fit a lot of states. Yeah, I grew up in New England, so I certainly know about being in one of the smallest. Massachusetts, one of the smallest states in the country. Going from that to this was a huge shift for me. But you could take a lot of states in the country and smash them geographically into California, and then you have the North versus the South, the redistricting subject, which to me was always about division. How do you go about unifying Northern California, Southern California in a way that brings people together instead of this divisionistic mentality that's been so pervasive here for so long?
I look at it similar to racism, where people will look at the color of your skin and suddenly they'll put you in a box, but ultimately we all have the same color blood, and that's red, right? So if California is the same way. So you do have sections of California. We have to respect that. So culturally, like my wife, I will respect her culture, which is Mexican, right? I will respect somebody's culture. So I will respect, or California, Northern California should respect what Central, the coast, or Southern California believes in. That's just their deal. Respect that. But remember, we're all the same blood. We're all California. So ultimately, we can't work separately. We have to work together. The beauty about it, and I'm hoping to help people realize this, instead of being divisional, we should be unified. Because can you imagine if we were unified under one flag and one people in California, the power alone that we have in the United States and the rest of the world is exponentially greater than most other countries. So unification is a must. And part of my platform is unification. And even in Democrats, independents, and Republicans, because ultimately, and I've already done the research on this, the masses believe on 85% of the same things. 85%. But it's the 15% that the left and the right pay attention to because that division is very important to them because if they divide, they conquer. So
Right.
I will do my best to unify everything and talk about what's most important that we all agree on. I really don't think there's many people on the left that really want homelessness. I don't think there's many people on the left that really want children being raped. I don't think they want exorbitant gas prices. I don't think they want fires burning down cities and towns. I don't believe the left wants that. So we can all agree that let's do better there. All the sides agree. But unfortunately, the Republicans and the Democrats, that's not what they're talking about. They virtually only talk about where the divide is, which sickens me. So I will be the unifying candidate, I believe.
I support that, and you've got as you know, a tall task ahead of you. But somebody's got to do it because this state just cannot be sustainable the way it's been. I think we both know that it's a zero sum game.
Yes.
Um, Thank you for that, Lewis. Another question I want to ask you is the guise of the First Amendment is pervasive here, but yet no one wants to offend anybody. You've said that a few times in your discussion points. So there's a loose agreement about the First Amendment, but there's a very tacit disagreement about the Second Amendment, which winning red states have the least amount of crime and rate of recidivism, where California is failing ineptly in the prison system and people can't protect themselves. And even the criminals are rewarded and the victims are vilified. So it's completely ass backwards. How are you going to bring back the Second Amendment against this corrupt 15% that wants to keep that power in their favor and give it back to the people so they can protect themselves lawfully and not be the victims anymore that they've been for too long?
Yeah. So I believe there's a word in the Second Amendment saying shall or shall not infringe, if I remember correctly. And shall means absolutely, you will not touch this, right? And that's been completely ignored. California should be a Second Amendment state, but guess what? All 50 states should be a constitutional carry Second Amendment state. That's just the way it should be. It's a no-brainer. Here's the challenge, and this is where I get myself in trouble with some Republican groups or some conservative groups, right? They are part of associations, in my opinion, that are pretending to protect your rights, but they're not. Because the reality is when these groups go up against California and they bring their attorneys in, they say, okay, we're going to try to get you 10 bullets in a magazine instead of the 6 that they're trying to limit you to, right? Or we're going to try to get you back that Glock gun instead of saying no. It's very simple. It says shall not infringe, which means not at all. And I'm starting to believe deeply that a lot of these pro-gun rights groups are there more for their membership than we the people. Because if they only talked about shall not infringe, it's not constitutional. That's all we need to talk about. Get that to SCOTUS, get a ruling, you're done. But guess what? Then they don't have membership. Then they don't have anything to fight about. They don't have the boogeyman anymore, right? That is where I think we went wrong. So I'm a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment and only the Second Amendment. And guess what, John? We don't have a First Amendment without the Second to protect it.
That's a really good point, a very good way to look at it too. I agree. Thank you for that. You touched on this earlier, but I want to investigate a little bit more, Lewis. Again, as I said, I've lived here for quite some time, and I've always felt that the housing, like everything else, is vastly overrated and overpriced to a ridiculous degree, particularly when I look at what you can get, excuse me, in other states for a fraction of the cost with infinite more land. I mean, and I lived in New York City, so I know about living in compressed areas, and LA certainly feels like New York with less grass. So, with all that said, you talked about removing income tax. You talked about removing property tax, which is long overdue and is constitutionally sound, like President Trump's about to do, et cetera, et cetera. How do you give Californians more value for the money when they've been so accustomed to being screwed, for lack of a better term, and regulate the banking system, which has been one of the most corrupt in the country here, and get that reined in so that people are not paying? Because, banks don't produce any products or services. So we don't really need a central bank. We can go back to a gold asset-backed dollar economy, et cetera, et cetera. How do you pull that in with all the vast gold reserves that California has, particularly in the Northern California, San Francisco region where it all began, right, in the 1800s with the mining? How do you pull all these financial things together and put that back into the hands of the people instead of it being wrested away from them?
Well, I'm going to reverse engineer this, so I'll kind of answer the last part first. And it's something where our team is working on is I believe that we can have a gold-backed currency specifically for California. Think about the ramifications of that.
Wow.
Huge. That would literally eliminate the central banking system immediately. And if you could also figure a way to do that digitally, gold-backed digital currency, now they're done, right? And I know these are outlandish, scary things, but let's really think about this. So the zeitgeist would tell you that the reason why property taxes, or let's just say virtually everything in California is overpriced, right? The zeitgeist would say it's overregulation, it's overtaxation, right? And the free market does this. Okay, well, the free market is not a free market. We have an illusion of a free market right now because when we have the overtaxation and the overregulation, right, the market is manipulated. When you subsidize some businesses over others because you determine that that's going to benefit you, the political class, more, that goes back into the economy. But here's the one that nobody talks about, John, and it blows me away. What's the most popular talking point in California right now? We have probably the most fraud from a governmental level of any other state.
Hmm.
So think about this. So who's a recipient of that waste, fraud, and abuse? Bad guys. What do bad guys do? They go spend money. What are they willing to do? They're willing to spend more money than you and I are willing to spend for a product or service or a house. Therefore, what happens? It skyrockets. So all the money that's stolen, they're spending a premium on their products to get what they want to get, and it affects all the people below. It's disgusting. There's actually proof on it, and we have investigators looking at this right now. Do you know that based on the money laundering that it looks like the cartels do inside of our country right now, that's supported by attorneys, possibly have increased the prices on real estate in LA and San Diego by 30% because that's how they launder their money is through real estate. So that's the picture's a lot larger, but you have to have somebody like myself that's vested in really figuring out what the problem is if you're going to tackle it. So I can just scream at the top of my lungs, "Oh, it's overregulation," and be done with it. Well, that's a nice talking point, but the reality, it's a lot deeper than that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There's so many tranches and nuances to the, for lack of a better term, the lasagna of the problem. There's so many layers, right? But at least wanted to get a starting point with you and start to, break down a place to go with it. Because again, it's just ridiculous and untenable. Anybody who's lived here for a period of time knows that. You talk about infrastructure and transportation. We know about the whole light rail scam with Gavin Useless that was going on. What was that going on since like 2010 or something? Because I got here in 2008 and they were talking about it. We're pump billions of dollars into this boondoggle that never materialized. Yet we have some of the worst infrastructure with the roads, just like New York. No big shock. The coasts are notoriously for sucking at a lot of things, and infrastructure is one of them. How are you going to turn that around with much better materials, but still at a fraction of the cost?
Actually, it goes deeper than that again, and it's much before that. So right now we
Okay.
have investigators into school bonds and investigators on the train to nowhere. And I can tell you the bond theft in California will blow your mind. People, when they see the actual money stolen from bonds, and then the refinancing of the bonds is something else. So let's say there's $10 billion stolen from bonds, and it's a lot higher than that. We already have the evidence. Let's say it's $10 billion, but you refinance these and you go a 15 or 30 or 40-year interest bearing bond that has to get paid off. Now you could be talking almost 10 times the amount. So that $10 billion number on something that was, by the way, 10 billion of which was stolen, probably 7 to 8 billion of that was stolen. Now you're paying, we the people are paying $100 billion for that $10 billion. That's deep. So the investigating, exposing, and fixing the bond issues is absolutely huge. What was the other part of your question?
Just about, thank you. How do you go about, rebuilding the roads and the bridges and
Oh, right.
infrastructure without all the boondoggle corruption?
Yeah, well, you have to first say you overregulation needs to go bye. You actually need oversight into every entity that is doing building. And they also have to, here's what's very important. When you hire out subcontractors to do some of this stuff, which is fine, that's great. You have to hold them accountable that their retail pricing is virtually the same as they're charging the government. which has not been done. I've talked to contractors. They're like, oh, it's a government contract. I take 120 days to get paid. If I'm lucky, I'm going to charge double to make it worth my while. And the government's signing off on it, saying, okay, no, what the government should do is become more efficient at paying to motivate these contractors to want to do a real compete. And then you do a real competition, not these fake competitions for contracts, right?
Hmm.
That alone, can you imagine if it would take half as much money to build something twice as better, twice as good? That's really what we're looking at.
Yeah.
So we can fix all the infrastructure in California to a very, very high level. I'm looking at new places to put dams and waterways to capture the 40 billion gallons that are lost into the ocean every single day. If we need a railway, it'll be a real one. There's a lot of things that we can do instead of playing games. And virtually, in my opinion, every infrastructure uh, cost out in California, there's waste in there, or there's some games that are being played, and somebody's getting kicked back, which is just crazy.
Yeah, it's the whole thing is just it's just piled corruption on corruption, as you know, and it just needs to stop wholesale. I guess another sort of subset, Lewis, of a question with regards to we'll put it under the bucket of infrastructure transportation. You know, the pipeline that runs from Northern California for water that President Trump just turned on not but a year ago with the fires, which we know was a land
Yep.
grab in the
Yep,
Venice in the
absolutely.
Palisades, and I had some friends who lost properties there, and I've had discussions with them. I'm like, you know, that was laser work. That was an inside job for sure. Um, how do you manage the water so that it flows more evenly to Southern California, isn't just feeding the North?
No, it's a great question. So you just have to be authentic about it when you're doing the evaluation of the water. And not playing any favorites. And we already know, and I've already talked to farm and people in agriculture about this. There's absolute favorites playing where that water's diverted to certain farms and certain. And for example, why would you have a private entity like the Resnicks, that own 60 to 70% of the water in a part of LA, by the way, happened to feed the Palisades fires, who were the number one donors to Gavin Newsom? How's that even possible? It's getting rid of the fraud. Literally takes them about half of all our issues in California alone away. Goodbye. All the payoffs gone. They're gone. So some things are very, very simple to do, right? Now, we're working on a project that I can't release yet, but I can tell you that will harness more water than you could possibly imagine to feed all the farms and people from
Mm.
all the way from North to Central Valley to Southern California with ease, and possibly even create new vacation spots. Let's just put it like that.
Sounds. I'm very intrigued. I'm looking forward to hearing that because you're right, Liz. Thank you for bringing up the farms because that's the other thing. Like California has so many great farmers and ranchers, as you know, and so much lush contrast of land and crops. I never understood why in the middle of January I had to get navel oranges from Australia when I know they can be grown here. I mean, then why are we, you know, exporting stuff that we could get right here? It doesn't make any sense. And so what you're talking about kills many birds with one stone, and we do need to support the farmers across the country, but particularly in California with, you know, what I was describing. Going back a second, Lewis, if I may, I just want to touch on something you talked about and dive into a little bit more deeply. You talked about the sheriffs, empowering them. So you're really talking about constitutionalizing the state, which obviously is long overdue. How do you educate attorneys out of statutory into common law and police from corporation into constitution with the sheriffs? How do you merge all that together?
Yeah, it's tough, and this is a fantastic question because this is where it
Thanks.
gets very murky and messy.
Uh-huh.
The reality, we should all be in constitutional common law. That's the end goal. Many people that are of that thought think it's just a switch that can turn over. But what happens is, in regards to the attorneys that are all paid by the bar, the British accredited registry,
Mm-hmm.
about that,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't mean paid, I mean trained by them.
Right.
Um, that's who they answer to. They are absolutely looking at this definitely different. I believe Trump has given us a clue to this, a big clue. And I've mentioned this many, many times. Trump has said we need to do things legally and lawfully, legally and lawfully, legally and lawfully. Well, I look at legal as that corporate corrupt structure that we have right now, and I look at
Exactly.
lawful as where we need to go.
Correct.
So, and I've talked to a lot of common law folks that really know law. They know affidavit, they understand writs, and they've taught me a lot also. And I said the Achilles heel to this that I see is when you all are fighting, you're fighting using common law language only. If you really want to make this transition, I think you should infuse the common law language with the legally known language now so we can make a transition to where we need to go. And then we have training programs so the actual BAR attorneys start understanding what's really going on. Because I think many of them don't even know, John. I think they don't know what they don't know.
It's
They've been
true.
conned in just like doctors.
Yep.
I can't believe how many doctors I've schooled on the way pharmaceuticals are ran and how there is alternative things, so on and so forth. And they're like, wow, I didn't even think of it that way because their construct, their training, their programming is both for both attorneys and doctors is with the blinders on in a certain direction, and that's all the Rockefeller realm is what I call it. So
Yep.
I believe we can train them out of them because one thing I've noticed, and you probably noticed it too, some of the most staunch supporters of patriotism today were lefties yesterday because when they figure out that they've been intentionally conned and they wake up, they are empowered to make a difference in the other direction. I've seen it time and time again. And I think it would be the same thing with doctors. I've seen it with doctors, actually. I think it would be the same thing with attorneys. So we need to transition into this. Would I like to flip a switch and do it? Yeah, but it would disrupt everything and people are going to freak out and it's never going to happen because there's no education behind it. So now it's an education training. Same thing I want to do at the Sheriff's Symposium. We need to educate them what constitutional law really is, what they are available to do under the Constitution and the powers that they have. Same thing with these bar attorneys. There's a big movement right now. By the way, I'm a big believer in parallel societies. There's a big movement right now in people doing a pro se case where they're representing themselves. And there's a lot of them doing a really damn good job. And there's another background support group here that are supporting those pro se cases. And they really understand the law. And judges are even shutting down their cases and saying, I need to go think about this. And they're going back and they're coming back and ruling in case. Now, are there corrupt judges? Yes. Huge percentage of corrupt judges. We're going to handle that in a different way. But I think this is all about education. I think they just don't know what they don't know at the moment.
Mm. No, I think there's a lot of validity to that. So, in a compassionate way, Lewis, are you sort of going to, I don't want to say an ultimatum, but ultimately, diplomatically bring them to the door like, look, this is the way we're going. We'd like to
Absolutely.
encourage you to go this way. If you have a choice, right? Like the homeless, you can choose to be homeless or not homeless, right? Whatever. Because some homeless people think it's better to live homeless than to try to live in fabric of society that they don't function, et cetera, because they haven't been empowered to this point to do otherwise. Are you in a similar vein, basically saying, if I'm hearing you right, hey, look, this is the way we're going, this is the right way. Maybe you didn't know it, or you did know it and it was too profitable to get caught up in the corruption like every other vertical, and either you're going to adapt or be shown the door. Is that kind of where you're leading?
That would be the end result. Yeah. I just think the transitional time between that is what we have to figure out.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, go back to financial because this is a big vein of what we do here. You talked about some stuff I just can't ignore: a digital and a physical gold token, which makes sense in California because we have such a wash of gold here from the history of the state. How do you make that happen in practical terms, and all the fraud and waste and abuse like Doge, like what President Trump is doing, the OFAC list, and you know about that. How do you bring those monies back to the people in a form of refunds and returns and all of that type of stuff?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do, we have to super Doge to see what's been stolen from the people.
Mhm.
But I'm estimating based on a lot of research and conversations I have and pulling records, but I don't truly know the exact number, right? So when we figure that out and we figure out what our budget is, we can simultaneously be working on creating these alternate currencies for sure at the same time. But in regards to see what the people get back, I wouldn't have the answer until we actually just dove completely into the budget, saw what the expenditures, so on and so forth. What I do believe though, I do believe that what's under the ground is not governmental. That's the people's. That's the people's minerals. That's the people's gold. That's the people's silver. That's, in fact, that's even their oil. So we have to figure out that. I'm not saying I'm going to do what the previous Libya model was, but the previous Libya model was very interesting. And I think it's why we took out Gaddafi, unfortunately, because he was the modern day Nasar Jassar. For the people that don't
Mhm.
understand what that is, that's really what he was doing. So he
Yeah.
found a way to use the minerals in the ground and so on and so forth,
Yep.
and get rid of the central banking system, uh, get his people a form of income, full free education, incentives for marrying, having children, non-violence. It was very amazing actually. And then our corrupt governments demonized him and took him out, I think, because he was the example of what could be done. At the time, Libya was plush. People think it as a desert. It was plush. They had
Hmm.
beautiful living quarters, resorts. People were very, very happy. Um, so I believe there may be a model there to look at to help get the people participating in the rewards that can come from what's under the ground here.
I agree. And to add to that, Lewis, you look at Saddam Hussein, same model as Gaddafi, trying to free his people and would not go along with a private Western central bank. We need to remove those altogether, and that's what Trump is doing, particularly in Iraq and the not too distant future, as you know. So that's why I was curious to ask you about how to return those monies back to the people in conjunction with removing property taxes and excise tax and all that other crap that it's unconstitutional, never should have existed.
Mhm.
Add a subset to that, Lewis, another boondoggle you well know, as I do, the DMV and the
Oh, we
massive
love the
amount of,
DMV here,
oh,
John.
yeah,
What are you
said no one
talking
ever.
about? So no one ever, right?
I think a root canal would be more enjoyable than
Oh,
going to that place.
wow.
Oh my goodness, how are you going to deal with that? I mean, we shouldn't be paying for tags, especially every year. And if you have a 5-year-old car, you're paying almost as much as you were the first year. That's ridiculous. That doesn't even. You go to other states and you get a tag for 2 or 3 years for a fraction of the cost. Now you shouldn't be having to pay that stuff, but how do you deal with the moribund scene of the DMV and the scam, the scheme of corruption here?
Isn't it interesting that we pay more fees and taxes per capita than any other state when it comes to things that should supply better infrastructure, but we have the worst infrastructure? How exactly does that work? Because it would blow your mind. It's because it's corruption. It's corrupt.
Absolutely.
It's corruption at the highest level and
Yeah.
every level below, all the way that you get to the DMV. The first thing we would do is we would do a full audit of the DMV and figure out, why do you need this money? Where is that money? Where's that money going exactly? And I think we're going to find out immediately that we're in another corrupt system. And I'm sorry, you take it down. I am of the opinion that reforming California means bringing a lot of things down to the foundation, and that scares people. And I get it. I absolutely get that it scares people. But if you continue to do what you get, you're going to get what you got, and we can't do that anymore. So a lot of this stuff has to go down the foundation, and then we can rebuild from there. If we really, really find that we need some form of fees or DMV, well, we'll look at it. The reality though is, I'm sometimes wondering, why do we even need a license to travel on the roads at all?
Exactly.
So, um, and it should come down to, I know a lot of people say, well, this can happen and this can happen. Well, there are laws. So if somebody does something like running a red light, there's still a law for that. The key is you need to hold people accountable for breaking laws that can possibly harm people,
Exactly.
right? You don't really need all these licenses and all these fees. And ultimately, you would know this better than anybody. It's just an excuse for more money to come in and line the pockets of the bad guys.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And again, we could be here all day talking about this, the airport and the highest airport fees and the highest, gas plane fees that, it's it's gotten so corrupt and so many knots in the system for so many years that I think what you said is right. You're going to have to do a reset in the gut and go back to the studs. If we go back to the Constitution, what our forefathers imbued us and equipped us, we can fix all of this. It's just somebody needs, from a leadership standpoint, top down to do it. So the first person that goes and actually does it is going to, help the people reap the rewards and them themselves, right? Just a couple more questions, Lewis, to respect your time, because again, this could be a very long, protracted discussion. There's just so many layers.
Feel free to bring me on for a part 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah. I'd love to do that because this would take part 12 with this state. But you talked about earlier about respecting the variances between the different parts of the state, northern, central, the country, LA, et cetera. Inside of that, I can't help think part of our constitutional backbone, and this is just me talking as a Christian, we are a Judeo-Christian nation.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there is a move in California for Sharia law and certain factions of that belief that are impinging that. How do you restore to Christians and Jews alike in California that want to practice and expand their faith in the midst of that growing movement?
Well, I think all faiths should be open to practice and grow. That's constitutionally, that's what we're looking at. The founding fathers respected all your freedoms in regards to religion, right? So it's not for me to dictate, although I'm a Christian, it's not for me to dictate what somebody else should do or shouldn't do in regards to religion. We should all be able to open and thrive the way the founding fathers set it up. What we have to be very careful of, though, is there are some aspects, let's say, of the Islamic faith that are actually preaching a takeover of the country. That should be illegal, right? They're preaching Sharia law. Sorry, Sharia law should be illegal because it is not within our boundaries of law, right? Period. End of story. I don't think you can never, if you're shown that you forced a woman to wear a burqa, that's breaking one of our laws. If they chose on their own to do it and it was not through intimidation or force, that's great. That's them. Same thing. If you choose to be a transgender, if you're an adult, that's your call. But if you try to influence a child to do something like that, sorry, that's when we step in and say that is unacceptable. That won't happen. So I believe all religions should have an opportunity to thrive. And I personally believe that if they all had the level playing field, right, most people would end up choosing Christianity. That's my belief system, right? In my faith. That being said, if what you do with inside your church is trying to propagate anarchy, right, or trying to take us over, or doing something illegal, which I think Sharia law is illegal, that's when the government needs to step in and say that cannot be accepted.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant. I'm not saying like you have to force everybody to be Christians. No, I'm saying that creating an environment, because California, as you know, has a very different environment than other states in terms of cultural overreach and influence. So it's allowing people to practice their faiths without a religion or the guise of a religion, which is really an agenda. You don't want to control anybody. You don't want to be controlled either. And that's a balancing act. That's, from your standpoint, what you're going to be tasked to do is going to be really tough. But
yeah, it's not easy. So for example, I understand the 501c3 is supposed to give churches tax exemptions, but then you throw little things on there that they feel like they can't have influence in a political way.
Right.
They can't discuss something like that because they're going to lose their money. Well,
their status. Yeah.
And people say that's because it is written that there is a church and state cannot mingle. Well, people need to really go read the language. The original language
Mhm.
is not that churches couldn't talk about government issues, it's that governments couldn't be involved in churches.
Right.
And that language was reversed and manipulated to say that otherwise. So this is the
Yeah.
things that we have to be aware of.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Well, I'd love to have you back on again, Lewis. There's so much to dissect in this subject. It's been fascinating. It's great to get your perspective. If people want to learn more about you and your campaign, how to get involved from a grassroots level, how would they do that?
Appreciate that. So it's hermsforcali.com. That's
Okay.
HERMSFORCALI.com. Go on
Mhm.
there, see my policies, learn anything you want to do. We'd love donations because we got to get to that 10% of what the other guys are doing to win this. And support. We have a lot of beautiful volunteers and we have a grassroots effort that's huge now. So just put in there, I want to volunteer. We'll have somebody reach out to you. We'll get organized with you. The beauty is you can volunteer or donate and you can be all the way in another country because the California probably set it up for there to be some deep state swampy activity in regards to that, but we're going to take advantage of it ourselves as well.
Nice. So Herms for Cali, what was it again? I'm sorry.
Hermsforcali.com.
.com. Okay, we'll put that link in the description below the video. Are you at any rallies in the near future?
Yeah, well, actually, even on the 10th, on Saturday the 10th, we
Okay.
are actually in a debate. So it'll be
Oh,
myself, Steve Hilton, Chad Bianco, David Serpa, and Daniel Mercury, which some people are considering the top five. So that's probably why the debate is there with those five.
where's that going to be located?
That's in Garden Grove, California.
Yep. Just the other side of me, about 40 minutes away in Orange County. So good area. All right. Well, Louis Herms, thank you for joining us, sir. Candidate for Governor of California. Really appreciate your time, information, and hopefully we'll have you on again in the near future.
Appreciate you, John. Thank you.
Thanks.